we found my dad dead. So all of those events, they were actually things that I didn't deal with. I didn't know how to have or experience grief. And I did a lot of running away into self-destructive behaviors. And gambling was one of those things. And gambling really became my coping mechanism when I didn't know how to cope and didn't have the tools to cope. And that led me to a true breaking point that ultimately led to a breakthrough in 2016. I started asking a bunch of questions about my dad then, because it was like I knew my dad had died, and I'd always been told he died in his sleep. And something had come up. I think somebody said something about a car, and I was like, wait a minute, like that story doesn't match. I'm old enough to have some connecting of dots. This is where I'm gonna let the emotions just happen. Like I had this deep sense of like, why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't I enough to stay? And I didn't have an understanding of depression at the time. And I think for any parent who might be having to have this kind of conversation with a child or even a family member, like the thing that really could have been conveyed differently to me was that I was enough, and that this was a mental illness, and that this is not it wasn't a conscious choice on my dad's part. This was his disorder, his mental disorder that led him to take those actions. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I think stories like this really matter, and they mattered to me when I needed some hope. So I appreciate your commitment to getting our stories out there.
Well, you're most welcome. And I really appreciate you for taking the time to joining us today. You're ready. Can you share a little bit about yourself? Tell us who Terra Kabat is.
Yeah. So you've said my name, right? We all know my name. So I'll share just a few things about myself. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a mother, a sister, a friend, a daughter, and I'm also a business owner. So there's probably 3 core things to my entrepreneurial journey that you'll hear me talk about today. One, as I own a recruiting firm, I help companies fill difficult to fill positions. 2, I'm a self-discovery mindset coach. I help women figure out who they are, what they want, and how to get it when it feels like they've forgotten all of those things. And then lastly, I'm the host of a podcast called Ambitious Addicts, where I uplift stories of women in recovery, all addictions, and all pathways to healing. So that's just a teeny bit about me, but I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot more about me.
Perfect. And as much as you feel comfortable sharing, was there a season or experience that deeply shaped your story? If you can just take us with us into your journey, into your life, and share with us, was there a particular experience that you faced that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, there's several, and I'm going to try to be brief, and I'm very practiced at talking about these things. So I'm saying that just because I'm going to talk about things that are heavy, that often would be really emotional and often are very emotional for me. But when I talk about them like this in a timeline fashion, I'm kind of just, here's all the things. So, I'm a person who is now in long-term recovery from compulsive gambling. And that is something that we'll probably talk about in some of those future questions. But when I look at those moments that really were some of the biggest challenges I've faced as a person, I would say number 1 is my grief, and number 2 is my gambling addiction. And just a bit about that grief. I've experienced a lot of loss personally. My biological father died by suicide when I was 3. My grandfather,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry to hear about that. So sorry for your loss.
Thank you. And there were a lot more. When I was 15, my grandfather, who had been a male role model and a cheerleader and many things, an example of unconditional love to me, he died of a stroke when I was 15. 10
Oh,
years later, my mother was diagnosed with and died of cancer.
oh, I'm so sorry.
9 years
So
after that,
sorry.
her mother died of cancer. And the
Wow.
two of us had become tight after my mother's passing. And then 1 year after my grandmother's passing,
Yeah.
um, my sister and I found my dad, not the one, obviously, who had died when I was 3, but we found my dad dead. So all of those events, um, they were actually things that I didn't deal with. I didn't know how to have or experience grief. And I did a lot of running away into self-destructive behaviors. And gambling was one of those things. And um, gambling really became my coping mechanism when I didn't know how to cope and didn't have the tools to cope. Um, and that led me to a true breaking point that ultimately led to a breakthrough in
Mm,
2016. So
yeah.
the the grief and a lot of loss, tragic losses in my life, and the gambling addiction, I would say, are those pivotal moments for me.
Wow. Whew. I
I
don't,
know it's a lot.
it's a lot, yeah. Sometimes hearing stories like this make you realize that when you think you're having it hard in life, when you hear stories like this, you actually realize that you've not really had it the hard way, you know?
The same is true for me, right? Like I also talk to other people whose stories are even more tragic than my own. And I think that's the importance of the work you're doing. Is like everybody's got to know they're not alone in their pain.
That's right.
And you can get
That's
to the
right.
other side of it and be like, I'm a business owner now, like multiple things, right? And I can smile and I
I
can
know,
talk
right?
about these things because I've done the
Yeah.
work to do the healing.
You have actually done the work because to really look at the things that, to really look at the things that you say that you've gone through and the depth of what you faced, and you're here standing and sharing all this. Wow, I applaud you, to be honest. I really applaud you. Just take us back to your story, and I would like you to take your time. And if there's a point whereby you don't feel like just taking a pause or a break, a breather, please go ahead. What was that time like you on a day-to-day basis? So let's talk about from the loss of your dad to the loss of everybody that you loved and you were close to in your life. When all these things were happening, can you just take us through how that was for you on a day-to-day basis, having to cope with all those things?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't really cope. My biological father, I didn't even know that that was a suicide. I mean, no one would, most people likely would not tell a 3-year-old that. So I
Mm,
didn't learn that until later in my life. Um, but I think, and I can look back at this through a healed or healing, I think that's a continuous process, lens, and say, I didn't cope. I just kept it moving. I kept going. And as you're kind of saying right now, a lot of people are like, wow, you're so strong. And
mm,
I took that in and I made that my persona.
mhm.
Um, Holding it together, just continuing to go through life, never actually facing the emotional experience of grief in the way that I now have. Um,
Uh,
so I got busy, I did the work, I did the, I went to work, I went to school, I parented, I just
yeah.
immersed myself in doing all sorts of things to never be alone in my pain. And not never, obviously, like there were bouts of crying, there were some grieving experiences, but frankly put, I I wasn't coping. I was escaping, and I
Mm.
was running away from the pain I didn't know how to have or how to feel or how to deal with.
Mm.
Um, the I think that the lack of having those emotional experiences and allowing myself to be in pain instead of being the strong one,
Yeah.
um, I think that ultimately is what kept leading me to the escapism. And um, the gambling was a thing that started out as something fun, and then it became the thing I turned to when I didn't want to deal with reality. So
Right.
I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, you have. And at what age, if you don't mind sharing, at what age did you start gambling? And was this part of your coping mechanism, or you just found yourself going down that slope? Looking
Um,
back now, was it a
yeah,
coping mechanism?
yeah. And part of my healing process has been to do like a timeline of my gambling behavior. And funnily enough, um, I was introduced to gambling at a very young age. My grandfather used to take me to, I don't know where you are geographically. Where in the world are you?
I'm in the United Kingdom.
Okay. So in the
Yeah.
United States, we have these establishments called a VFW. It's basically um, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and and
Yeah.
they have establishments and they do things in community, but they also have bar restaurants. My grandpa
Hmm.
used to take me to the VFW with him. I was like 6 years old to
Wow.
be his little sidekick while he was playing poker with his war buddies. My
Oh.
grandfather taught me how to play blackjack. My grandfather taught
Hmm.
me about odds on football games. And it wasn't an activity I engaged in a lot in my youth. He also took me to the horse track. However, legally in the United States, in the place where I live, you can begin to gamble at casinos beginning at the age of 18, or you could at the time. And so I had, I went, I had gone, I had fun. And when I looked at that timeline, my mother's death, um, actually after her diagnosis of cancer, I can look and be like, wow, I was gambling a lot then. Like I gambled a lot. I was going to the casino a lot back then, like with a friend, when my mom was sick, and I kept going and going and going to the casino. And this was in my early 20s now, mid 20s. My mom was diagnosed and passed away when I was 25. Um, and the gambling activity spiked back then. But I had a friend who was like, "What are you doing? Like, you're supposed to finish college, and what are you doing? You're throwing your money away." And
Yeah.
that little tough talk with me at the time was enough for me to go, "Oh yeah, you're right. Like, this is not a good thing for me to be doing." And I
Yeah.
interrupted the behavior, but I never saw it recovery. Um, and as I mentioned, after my mother passed away, my grandmother and I became close, and we would sometimes go together to the casino as a social activity with one another, and maybe sometimes spend more than we wanted, but never, I wouldn't call that an addictive behavior. And I don't think at that
Hmm.
point that it was a coping mechanism. I think it was a coping mechanism when my mom was sick and in the months after she
Right.
died that I did stop. And then, grandma and I having this like tradition when she was visiting or staying with me for some time, we would often go visit the casino. After she died, and my son was older and I had more free time and I also had more money, I
Mm.
started to go to the casino alone. Um, and that's when it became a more progressive thing. I think I had convinced myself in the beginning, like this is just something I do for fun. Um, but looking at it, I can see like I would go and I would play and then I would leave. But then I started going more often and spending more money. And it might sound weird to say it, but maybe not. I would play her favorite slot machines and feel like I was spending time with her. I would sit at the blackjack table and like make the quote unquote right play according to how my grandfather taught me, and
Yeah.
feel like he would be proud of me. And I would sit at the poker table, and every time I won a pot, remember like thinking to myself, like, oh, grandpa would be proud. Like,
Mm.
you know, um and in an odd way, it was intertwined with my grief because I felt like I was spending time with those who I'd lost.
Oh, wow. So this felt like it brought some form of closeness with your lost
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
So
And
the
it
more you
reminded
kept,
me of them.
so you kept on going and going and going, and the more you kept going, the more closer. Oh,
Um, Yeah, I don't know. Gambling is designed to be addictive. You know,
it
that's
is. It is.
it intentionally, because
Yeah.
they want to keep you coming back. And I don't think that me going back was ever an intentional and continuing to go and go more frequently. I don't think consciously anyway that there was
Yeah.
a, oh, I'm going to spend time with my family. I just knew that when I was there, I felt
Yeah.
good. And I didn't feel
Mm.
bad, and I didn't feel
Yeah.
lonely, and I didn't feel sad. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I felt confident, despite losing money all the time. Like, I mean,
Wow.
there's no real logic to the why, right?
Yeah.
Other
Mm-hmm.
than the effect that it has on your brain and the chemical,
To the
the
dopamine.
the dopamine and
Mm.
maybe even sometimes serotonin, oddly, because you can get in
Right.
this like trance-like state on a slot machine specifically. Um, yeah, so you know, I think it was just the nature of the progressive illness that addiction is. That's what kept me going and going and going, and it did get to the point where it was so out of control, um, that I hit a breaking point. I had thoughts of suicide, and that really scared me because I didn't want to leave my
Mm.
son with the same thoughts that I had about my dad dying by suicide, and I
Mm.
sought help after that
Wow.
moment.
At what stage or how old were you when you realized that your dad died from suicide, and how did you get to know? Who sat
You,
down and told you, and how did they break this news to you?
you know, it's an interesting thing to reflect on, and I think for parents who maybe have to communicate something like that, um, maybe a lesson in taking the care to assure the child that it had nothing to do with them. It was right around the time of my grandfather's death. You know, I hadn't experienced a lot of death up until that point. Um, not even the loss of a pet. So I didn't have you know, I don't think I had a good concept of what death meant. You know, at 15, obviously I knew well enough, but I started asking a bunch of questions about my dad then, because it was like I knew my dad had died, and I'd always been told he died in his sleep. And something had come up. I think somebody said something about a car, and I was like, wait a minute, like that story doesn't match. You know, I'm old enough to have some connecting
Mm.
of dots. And so I
Yeah.
guess you know, I started asking more questions. And then my mom did tell me, at that point, but it was me prompting the questions. And I don't
Yeah.
remember a lot about it. But what there's a few things that I do remember that I think
Hmm.
are important lessons if this is your family's experience.
Yeah.
One was that I felt really betrayed by my mom. Like she'd been
Mm.
lying to me my whole life. And there was never this explanation of like why I didn't tell you sooner, or if there was, I don't remember it. I mean, it's possible
Yeah.
that there was. And
Mhm.
then two, I had this deep sense of like, this is where I'm gonna let the emotions just happen. Like I had this
Yeah.
deep sense of like, why wasn't I enough?
Mm.
Why wasn't I enough to stay? And I didn't have an understanding of depression, at the time. And I I think for any parent who might be having to have this kind of conversation with a child or even a family member, like the thing that really could have been conveyed differently to me was that I was enough, and that this was a mental illness, and that this is
Yeah.
not it wasn't a conscious choice on my dad's part. This was his disorder, his mental
Mm.
disorder that led him to take those actions. I've since gained a lot of awareness around what leads up to a death by suicide. So that's the second thing. And then I think lastly, keeping an open conversation. And this is true,
Mhm.
Sandy, of all of my grieving experiences. My family, it was like we don't speak of them. It was like no one could
Yeah.
talk about the dead people. And I say it so blunt. I say dead people, like I don't even use the language naturally of saying people who
Yeah.
have passed away.
Yeah.
It is gentler, but I mean, it's a death,
Yeah.
and people do die, and that's normal, and that's part of the circle of life, and it actually can be a really
Mm.
beautiful thing to discuss the life we shared with one another while they were still walking the earth with us. And
That's right.
um, it was very much a closed door thing. And I think my brother, my sister, and I are learning, how to talk about mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, and how to,
Mhm.
how to giggle about the memories together. But for a
Yeah.
very long time, it was like, oh, let's not, we can't talk about that. And so that would be the third thing.
Wow. And just before I go to my next question, I just want to remind you that you are more than enough. And I'm sure you know it by now, but it's just a reminder that you are definitely more than enough, Terra. So, Terra, tell me, how did you learn to carry what you were going through, especially when others may not have seen what you were going through? How did you get to that stage? How did you
Yeah.
actually learn to carry all these things that you went through in your life from a younger age up to where you are right now?
Yeah, I think, definitely I just carried it is how I handled it until I started recovery. And I have to say, for me, my personal experience was finding a 12-step program that helped me um, face the facts of a gambling addiction and begin that 12-step process in partnership. I also did some therapy. Um, that 12-step process includes a group therapy type of a thing with peer support. And so really surrounding myself with other people who had been through both trauma and addiction was extraordinarily helpful, because they told me what they did, and I was like, let me try, maybe that'll help me, let me try this, let me try
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, Therapy somewhat around, like, well, why am I the way I am? And then another thing I
Mm-hmm.
did, I mentioned this timeline thing. I worked with a narrative coach to really map
Oh,
out
wow.
that life history and timeline and the peaks and valleys in my life, because of course life is kind of 50-50. So yeah, I had all this bad
Yeah.
stuff that I did, but I also, I graduated from college despite all of that. And I was
Yeah.
accomplishing things professionally that were good. And so this gambling addiction thing, or the unhealthy coping mechanisms, those were like, that was only part of who I was. It was almost like I had these
Yeah.
two identities, this really ambitious and driven young woman who also had all of this pain. And I think I mentioned earlier, like, people would say, you're so strong. Well, the strong person
Yeah.
doesn't ever ask for help, right? So
Absolutely.
asking for help was critical. 12-step recovery, those things were really, really critical to me beginning to learn how to cope, how to have my emotions instead of running away from them.
Awesome. You mentioned that you started working with a narrative coach, and it's
Mhm.
something that I've never, honestly, I've never heard of a narrative coach before. Can you just briefly just tell us what a narrative coach, what
Yeah,
this narrative coach helped you with?
yeah. And this was happening in conjunction with some other things simultaneously. So,
Hmm.
um, a narrative coach will help you look at the story you're telling about your life and rewrite it.
Right.
And
Okay.
and I was already working on eliminating this victim mindset, but I also was working on my self-talk. One of the things in my gambling addiction, I I was speaking very negatively about me to me in my mind, meaning, saying things like, I'm worth more dead than alive, right? That was factually accurate if you were talking net worth only, but worth is not about
Mm,
money.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
was also saying, I'm so dumb. I can't believe I did that. And I was just beating myself up constantly in my
Mm,
head and the way I spoke to myself. And when people would recognize maybe something that they saw in me that they liked as a characteristic, I would diminish it or mute it down or be like, no, that's not true. Like somebody said once to me, you're a really good writer. And I was like, no, I'm not, just,
yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I'm not. And so the narrative coach helped me look at the story of my life as I told it. And I was telling it in this way of suffering and um, really being, I was mad at, I believe in a higher power. I call that God. But I also don't care how other people look at that. But
Me too.
um, for me, that that instruction from her of like, I thought God was mad at me, right? And I was telling this story that
Yeah.
like God must just want me to suffer, and that must be God's plan for me to be suffering all of these things, and like he abandoned me. And so the story I was telling
Yeah.
about my life was often about the suffering and the tragedy. And yet there was, as I mentioned, all these other really positive things. Like I was,
Yeah.
first in my family lineage, first generation college student. That's a big deal. I raised my
Absolutely.
son almost all by myself, a little bit of help in his early years from his father and from my family, but a lot of that was me and him, me and that kid. And and that, that the way I would tell the story about my life is like single motherhood was, a burden instead of a blessing. And
Mhm.
she really helped me look at like how I was telling the story of my life, both in a historical lens and in the present day. How are you talking about your life right now? And like
Mhm.
I said, at the same time, I was really looking at how I was talking to myself about myself and realizing there was a lot of things that I could change about that. And when you tell your story from a lens of overcoming and
Yeah.
strength and triumph and and softness and humanity and pain, um, it acknowledges how very human we are and how very normal it is to have this I don't know, yin and yang of life. Like that's the way it is. And I was really in my storytelling about my life, not framing it that way. It was like a lot of it was really, really negative, and that just wasn't true.
And I'm glad that you have brought that up because I think a lot of people, without knowing or subconsciously, do have those kind of narratives and they've got no clue. They don't even know that they're operating on some form of narrative that they need to work on. So I'm glad that you've brought that up in case someone is watching and this might be like a light bulb moment for them on how they can, start working on their narrative and all that. So thank you
And you could,
for
yeah, you could start with one sentence.
yeah. So what was the one sentence that you started with, if I may ask?
Hmm. I mean, we're talking years ago now, but I would say one of the powerful sentences that I needed to change was the one that I mentioned about like there's in 12-step recovery, there's a step, it's the second one where you come to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to a normal way of thinking and living. And I didn't have a problem believing that there was a power greater than myself. I didn't have a problem believing that power greater than me could restore me. I had a problem believing that it would, um, or that I was worthy of that. As I mentioned, I thought I'd been abandoned by my version of a higher power, and I, you know, um, I then had to kind of turn that around. And that's often what I'll do in my coaching work with the people that I do work with. I'm not a narrative coach, I'm a mindset coach, but it's similar in the sense of we're looking at a
Yeah.
sentence at a time. And I had to do this work on that sentence of, I was like, I already believe it could, but would they? But would it? Would my higher power really restore me? And I practiced just writing. I believe that a higher power will restore me. And there's something your brain does when you say, I believe, it'll start to look for proof. And then I saw all the proof, right? I saw all the proof that time and time and time again, there was something greater than me, connecting me to the right people, connecting me to the right opportunities. Like professionally, there was so much evidence, right? Great job, right time, right money. Just when I thought things were not going to work out with a boss, boom, there's a new job. I had tons of evidence that I had been restored time and time and time again in my life. And once I focused on that, the belief just continued to get stronger and stronger.
It was just changing one sentence at a time, one belief system at a time. I love that. I love that. So looking back now, what was there a moment, or when was the moment when everything shifted for you? When you thought, you know what, now I think I need help now. I think I definitely need help.
Yeah, the moment with the gambling addiction specifically, it was a night at a casino. I had spent my entire paycheck that night, and um, years earlier, I had encountered a woman who was leaving the casino, who had asked me if I could lend her money because she spent her whole paycheck. And I had judged that woman so harshly. And here I was, it was probably about 4 or 5 years later, sitting there. I have an empty gas tank in the parking lot and realizing like I don't even have like $2 to put a gallon of gas in my car. I waited at the casino for free play, and I'm giggling about it now, but in that moment, not funny at all. But I have this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I'm that woman. I'm her. What have I done? And when I went to leave, the casino has a body of water across the street from the exit. And it was a very, very fleeting thought. It was not something I acted on because my brain immediately was like, no, we're not doing that. But this is the moment I knew I needed help. I thought about driving up straight across the street. Um, and that terrified me. And I knew right then in that moment that I was in a really bad situation, and that I, despite all my attempts, because I'd tried to quit on my own many times before that,
Yeah.
it was at that point I said, this absolutely has to stop. I need help. And I called my big brother the very next morning and told on myself. And then we made a plan.
Wow. And that was really brave of you to do that. Because I can imagine if you hadn't done that, where would you be right now if you had not taken that step?
I don't think I'd be
Yeah,
alive. I don't
definitely
think I'd
not.
be alive.
So what helped you through that season? Was it people? Was it your faith? Or something else? Or it was a combination of all the three that I've asked?
Yeah, it was definitely a combination. My brother, my siblings, certainly when I told them, um, I was met with love and understanding. Like no one knew. This was a secret. No one knew.
Yeah. Wow.
Gambling is an addiction that a lot of times is kept secret, especially for people like myself who I don't share finances with anybody. I'm the only one who knows what's going on with my money.
Hmm.
And I lied about it.
Yeah.
Um, and and so when I told my siblings, I was met with unconditional love and support. Like it was like, oh my God, well, I had no idea. Like, how do we help? What can we do? That was critical, I think, to I'd made it in my head, like this reason that
Mhm.
I was a terrible, awful human, and I was
Yeah.
embarrassed and I was full of shame and remorse and regret. And I, being met with so much love and compassion and
Yeah.
support, it made a huge difference. Um, and then my brother, I have people that I know who had gone through other 12-step programs for other addictions. And there was this curiosity, like, well, I wonder if there's one for that gambling stuff. And there was.
Mhm.
And so
Mm.
my brother was like, well, what's the plan? And I said, well, people do that meeting thing. Like maybe I go to a
Yeah.
meeting. And
Mhm.
there's where the faith comes in. I kind of was feeling abandoned by God.
Yeah.
Um, my the very first meeting I went to, it was at the church I grew up going to and was confirmed at.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I saw
Was it
it,
was
I saw
was
that
that easy to do? How
uh,
was it? Was that did you find that easy to do, or that was a bit of tricky because
I saw it as a sign that it was the right thing to do.
mm,
Because that's where my parents got married. That's where I was
wow.
confirmed. That's where I was active in youth group when I was young. And I had, I'd on again, off again relationship with my faith through my
Mhm.
adulthood.
Mhm.
And to see that location as a place, because there's maybe 15 or 20 total meetings like this in my entire metro area. And
Yeah.
I had made the decision to start attending one. It was like a Saturday morning that I made the call to my brother. And
Mhm.
then the prompting was, okay, we'll go see if there's those meetings. So it's Sunday and I'm looking at the meetings and where I just did a radius search, like what's within 5 miles of me. And the first one that showed up for a Monday night was the one at the church I went to growing up. And I was like, oh, that's probably exactly where
Wow.
I'm supposed to be right now. Like, uh, it was almost this weird, comforting, like, I feel at home there. I went to that church for over a decade when I was young, about a decade when I was young. And yeah, so it felt actually not intimidating, but like exactly the right thing to do.
Wonderful. Was there any point of your journey of recovery and this 12-step process, did you ever feel like a self-condemnation, or did you at any point feel like people were judging you, or you felt like someone was judging you, or they were not like, what was that during that time?
Yeah.
Did you ever
Um,
condemn yourself?
Always, especially while gambling. And I think that recovery process really gave me the tools combined with the other things, right? To look at that. I was condemning myself and judging myself so harshly and worrying about other people's opinions of me that's a common
Mhm.
thread of my experience, hence the trying to hold it together and be strong because that's how people perceive me. So
Mhm.
I was trying to be that. Um, there was a lot. I mean, self-loathing was a large part of my addiction and a large part of what I needed to heal from and why I found the narrative coaching to be so helpful. In the 12-step recovery process, there is a place where you look at these things
Yeah.
with the help of somebody else who has done it before you. You look at those emotions, you look at your fears, you look at your resentments, um, and and there was a big theme of shame and regret and remorse.
Mhm.
And that was a big part of my negative self-talk.
Mm.
And the healing process combined with the other tools has helped me to be aware of that, hyper aware of that, and catch it and stop it um, now. But yeah, I was pretty self-condemning.
Wow.
Now, I
Wow.
still worry. I mean, I think it's kind of human. Like we always kind of worry about what other people think of us a little bit, right? It used to be
Mhm.
almost debilitating. And, I do content a little bit myself. I'm trying to practice getting some more social media stuff out there and practicing getting on video. And I'm like, every time I'm a little scared, but I'm like, what are you actually afraid of? And if it's somebody else's opinion, this is not about them. This is about the person who needs to hear the message. Just keep it moving. Keep it moving, girl. Because if I listen to that, it'll stop me from doing anything I want to do.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that you say that you go on social media and worry about, because the fact that you're here today talking to me about this story,
It's a miracle.
it is absolute miracle. Because I think things like addiction, people can talk about grief openly, but things like addiction, some people would rather not even talk about that side of their
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And that's part of the 12-step program that the name has anonymous at the tail end of it. And that is something that I, from a principles perspective, I struggle a little bit. Like, I'm not a spokesperson for anything. Like, I'm not, they don't have affiliation with people because, of course, relapse is a risk for anyone who's got a
Yeah.
mental health disorder of any kind, including addiction. But I think I contradict. I recover out loud because other people's stories are what healed me. Other people opening up to me
Interesting.
is what healed me, knowing that I wasn't alone in this, knowing I wasn't the only one, knowing
Wow.
like, you're not really as special as you think you are. You're not the worst human on the planet.
You're not
And
the first one.
yeah, you're not the only
Mhm.
person who's done this. And in fact,
Yeah.
people have done more maybe self-destructive things because of this disorder than me. So
Yeah.
hearing that, people's stories, like, it saved my life, in my opinion. And I obviously, because I stopped gambling, and I'm happy to say that that's a one day at a time thing, and I will continue to work on this healing process from that. Um, I just, it's an honor to be able to speak publicly. Not everybody can. I'm self-employed. I don't have to worry what my employer thinks. And I do affiliate with a couple of organizations in the
Yeah.
recruiting pillar of my work. Every person on the leadership team in that organization, though I'm self-employed, we work together. They're like, yep, do your thing. Like, it's your life. You're like, do it. You think you want to make that impact on the world, go do it. So the people who are discouraging of it either are doing so because they really want to value that anonymity of the program, which is super important. I don't tell other people's stories. It's super important, but I can break my personal anonymity and be okay with that. And if they want to be upset with me about it, as long as it reaches just one person who needs to hear a message of hope, from healing from that disease in particular. Almost no one
Yeah.
talks about gambling, and there's only like a
Exactly.
handful of women on the planet who will talk about this and have the ability to talk about this publicly without risking their career or their reputation. I'm self-employed. It's not a risk for me. And if clients don't want to do
Exactly.
business with me because of that, so be it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, at least someone has to share this. Someone has to talk about this, because it's not really a topic. It's not really something that people go around talking about or sharing.
And
So the fact that you're actually sharing.
you guys in the UK have some really great awareness programs and really great, helpful nonprofit public health services that help people with gambling. And there are some spokespeople in the UK who are doing a really, really good job at educating the public. And you guys are passing some legislation that I wish they would in the United States. We got, what do you guys call them? Pokies, or we call them pokies there?
What's that?
The betting shops, what do they call them in the UK?
I think they just called betting shops.
Oh, okay.
If
Yeah.
if
You have a
if
lot
I
of them, I
yeah,
hear.
there is. That is so true. There is, and I wonder why, but yeah, I'm sure. Like you said earlier, they need to keep people addicted to something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a different kind of pub.
Yeah. All right. So looking back at your experience, the things that you have faced and gone through, what has that experience helped to shape who you are today? Or what did that help to reveal in you? Like, what did you learn about yourself through the things that you went through? What is it that you learned about yourself?
Yeah, I am so much. Like you, how much time do we have
Go on.
left? Um,
Go on.
yeah, like I am strong. And I believe that in a different kind of way, not as strong that I have to hold it up, but that
Mm,
um in the resilience, like I am a resilient person. Um,
yeah,
and I'm also weak in ways that
yeah.
um that mean it's okay to ask for help. I don't always have to be strong. I know that I'm a
Hmm.
highly emotional person. I did not know that about myself before. I'm way more emotional than I realize. I just used to, hide all those feelings from myself even.
Hmm.
I also, I'm a good singer. I'm a good writer. I have a good, my opinion, sense of humor. And one of the things that surprised me and continues to surprise me every day is that I somehow have a spirit that people feel really safe with. People feel safe telling me things that they often don't tell a lot of people, and they share their secrets with me.
Mm.
This has been true almost my entire life. In my work as a recruiter in
Wow.
interviews, it happens all the time where a candidate will be telling me something about a boss or a company, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know why I said that." And I'm like, because it's not something they would normally say in an interview. And I'm like, now
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's me. It's just me. It's just the effect I have on people. And I
Yeah.
see that now as a real beautiful strength, um, and a gift from God that I am meant to do work with. And so it's led me to all the things that I do now today. Um, so those are things that I discovered about myself that I no longer dismiss when people say things that are compliments to me. I look at like, oh, where's
Hmm.
the truth in that? And if that's a gift I have, how do I use that in a way is that is for a purpose that affects the world in a positive way?
I love that. I love that. And I love the fact that you said when people are going to be giving you compliments from now on, you're not going to just dismiss it. Because I think maybe it's actually your calling. Because in the words of two or more witnesses, we keep getting people saying the same thing. So that's definitely a calling.
I,
Definitely.
I believe that now
But it's
too.
just that, yeah, it's just that the people who are sharing might not even know that. I mean, they're just sharing. They don't know that they're acknowledging your calling
Hmm.
back to you.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, Tara, tell me, if I want you to speak to, it could be one person, two people, how many ever they are watching right now. If there's someone who's watching right now and they are currently going through the grief, they've lost so many people that they love, and they really don't know how to cope. Because I mean, when it comes to grief is just tricky. It's so tricky. It's not a one size fits all. Today you could be okay, tomorrow you're, it's just like this.
It doesn't
And
even have to
the
be
fact
today
that,
and tomorrow. It could be like one minute you're
yeah,
laughing about a memory, and the
yeah,
next minute you're a puddle of tears, and the next minute you're screaming in
yeah,
rage. It's
yeah.
yeah. I
And
I I
it
think
takes
that
someone who, yeah, it
go
takes
ahead.
someone who has gone through that grief to be able to understand. And
Yeah.
also, on the other hand, I also want you to speak to that person who's maybe still currently going through addiction, and they don't want anyone to know. They're just struggling with it, trying to thinking that they'll be able to get out of it. I just want you to talk
Yeah.
to those two different people.
Yeah. So I have one message that applies to both of them, and that is you're not alone. Um, there are people grieving. There are people who have walked through a grief experience and gotten to the other side to, move through life now without the thing that they're grieving. And grief can be from a number of things. It can be losing a person, losing a job, just life not going how you expected it to. Um, and then, so that's the you're not alone is the broad message to
Yeah.
all of the people. The other the thing that I would say to the audience of people who are grieving, actually this applies to both audience as well, is go be with those people. Um, and I'll share some ideas, because you don't have to be with those people and be a person speaking. You might be at a point where you don't want to speak, and that's okay. But be with the people who are grieving or have grieved. There's lots of ways to do that now, much more. Thank you to social media. You can passively be listening to podcasts and just knowing that you're not alone. You can get involved with Facebook groups and read posts by other people. You can watch TikToks. There's hashtags for both grieving and for addiction. And the last thing, again, applies to both audiences. It's look for the hope. Like sometimes we're so focused on the despair of it all that we forget that hope is available to us at every single moment. So if you find yourself maybe in a self-destructive pattern with addiction, and you're not sure if you need help and you're wondering, like, go look for the hope that it's possible that this problem in your life could be solved, because there's millions of people who have walked that path before you, trying to make it easier to allow you to walk the path behind them. There's footprints that you can follow, and there's people who will lift you up to that next level. Go look for the people who've gotten through the tough stuff. That's why I'm here today. I got through the tough stuff. To go look for the hope, because we can find despair everywhere, even in our own mind every day. And if we have to look for the hope, it makes sense to go look for it. And that's for both audiences too. And lastly, I would say journal.
Yeah.
Write about it.
I'm all about journaling as well. I love that. And thank you for just speaking to that one person that is watching right now, or is going to be watching this. So tell me, Terra, where are you right now with your life? And how do you honor that part of your story that you have gone through? How are you currently honoring that part of your life story today?
Yeah. My life today is like something I never even imagined was possible if you would have told me. So I've been in recovery. It'll be 10 years in July of this year.
Well done.
And thank you. With the help of many.
Yeah.
I like, my mind is blown, right? I own a business now. I have a podcast now. I am, a coach for women. I'm not really offering that service right now, but I do it. I volunteer on a board, and I have a good, relationship with my friends and my family. And all of the things I rattled off about the things I do professionally or through volunteerism, it's like, if you would have told me 10 years ago that that's what I would be doing today, I would not have believed you.
Yeah.
And I have a heart really full of gratitude for the difficult times in my life. They shaped who I am, and they made me who I am today. And without them, I don't think I would be doing the things that I am. Honoring those experiences. Part of it is it's continuing to talk about those experiences and kind of trying to be that example of hope for other people who might not be able to see it just yet. The other thing, I've kind of almost ritualistically started the season of the end of May is my mother's birthday, my grandpa's birthday, the death of my grandmother, and the death of my father, the man who raised me, father. Those all happened. Those all take place within a week at the end of May. So it's like my son's birthday, which is very joyous, on the 20th. And then 22nd, 23rd, and 25th are the other days. And that I started noticing a pattern. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score. I started noticing a pattern that in that time of year, every year I get a little like things.
Yeah.
And I think my body kept score. And so I've ritualistically now made it a point to travel and be in nature and take time off and sit with their favorite music and really spend time in the memory and talking to my ancestors. And that for me feels honoring. I also have come to believe a little bit in their presence coming spiritually through, for me, animals. And so whenever I see deer, I'm thinking of my mom and my dad. Whenever I see a butterfly, I'm thinking of my grandma. I don't know that there's an animal for my grandpa. It's probably more of uh, a sports team winning for him. But I see these little opportunities to honor memory. And then when I catch myself almost acting like one of them, I just kind of chuckle and be like, thank you for giving me that. My grandma had a noise that she would make whenever it was hard to get up. And I've started making
Mhm.
that noise as I've gotten older. I'm like,
Oh
oh, thank
my
you,
gosh.
grandma. I
Oh
sound
my
just like
days.
her. Yeah. And I try to
Oh
think
gosh.
about like, how do I be someone that I know that they would be proud of? Um, they had their stuff too, and
Yeah.
they had their own experiences too, that maybe weren't healthy. And in a way, I think my generation, my sister, my brother, and I are all working on breaking a cycle that was really kind of unhealthy when it came to mental health. And I
Hmm.
think they'd all be really proud of that.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that there are cycles that can run in a family. Like you've spoken about mental cycle. A lot of people who are even believers, the
Mhm.
Bible believers, but they don't even realize that there are cycles that you need to deal with in a family prayerfully, and not just ignore it, thinking it'll all get better.
Yeah. And taking my prayer and my meditation to the next level has been part of my recovery experience too. From a prayers
Hmm.
at a slot machine, we're like, please God, let
Yeah.
me win. Right?
Yeah.
Now it's, please guide me. Like, where do you need me? And
Yeah.
learning how to listen to that.
Oh, right.
Um, listen to the answer, look for the answer, seek the answer, as opposed to making a demand of my higher power.
Request.
Mhm.
I love what you've just said. You're no longer seeing the Most High like what you call it, machine slots where you're just making requests and expecting things. But now you're saying, what can I, what can I do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Guide
And
me.
guide me. And that shout relationship. No one wants to be in a relationship where it's just one way, where you're just asking and demanding and thinking the other person is okay with that. I think people tend to forget that the Most High, I mean, I don't think he wants us to just be, he wants a relationship. And when we do have that relationship, things start to just unfold. That's where healing starts, everything else.
I've also become very aware in my own spiritual journey and practice that I can let go of the idea of how at all I think other people should believe or practice
Hmm.
their faith.
Hmm.
Because I see, sometimes there's harm coming from religious
Yeah.
institutions. And so relationship and faith are really the core tenets of mine. Um, and no one's really going to know the absolute truth. We know what we believe, right? But
Yeah.
no one's going to know the absolute truth until probably the day that they die.
Yeah. Yeah. Relationship and faith. It's a individual journey, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah. So
the faith without works is dead, saying from the Bible. I
it's
can't even tell you what verse that is. That's been landing the last couple of years a bit harder. Like, okay, like you have the faith, but what are the works
it
that
works.
that
Yeah.
you, as a uniquely designed human,
Yeah.
what works are you designed to do? And I think,
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned, that gift of people just sharing things with me, like, oh, that's actually a gift, that's a talent that I was given. Not everybody creates that kind of spirit with somebody. So because I am one of those people, that's a
Mm-hmm.
work I can do to
Yeah.
honor the
Mm.
relationship I have with my higher power. He's bringing those people to me. He know
Yeah.
like, and I believe that. Some people might think that's wacky. I don't, and
Yeah.
that's okay. They
I don't.
can
I don't.
they can think what they want.
At the end of the day, it's an individual thing. Yeah, I don't really care what people think anymore, to be honest, because at the end of the day, we are facing our creator one by one. So I've stopped caring as well. I've stopped
Yeah.
caring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress for me. As I mentioned, sometimes
Yes.
I get scared of those
Yeah.
other people's opinions, but I can get
Yeah.
through it. Um,
You
you know,
will.
I think socially, because humans tend to be very social creatures, like anything we think
Yeah.
might risk us getting kicked out of the group, it can be scary.
Hmm. Yeah. Anything that can risk you being cancelled.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Lastly, for anyone who feels connected to your story, where
Mhm.
can they find you and learn more about the work that you are currently doing?
Yeah. There's and I'll stay focused on the coaching, the podcast, because the recruiting work. I mean, if you happen to need help recruiting and you're in the US, let me know. We can talk. You can
Hmm.
find me on LinkedIn by my name. That's where I'll talk about,
Right.
recruiting type
Okay.
stuff. But for coaching, the Self-Discovery Sisterhood, that's the website, the selfdiscoverysisterhood.com. There's a free resource on there. I'll host some free events from time to time. I'm not really making any kind of coaching offers at this moment, but that will change. And then I'm also relaunching my podcast. The
Hmm.
podcast is called Ambitious Addicts, and you can find that on any podcast platform. And I'd say right now my social media is a little scattered in how I approach it. I'm most consistent on my personal Facebook page, which you can find by my name. And then I'm playing around with TikTok more than I used to, and my handle there is
Yeah.
self discovery coach there. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok right now are where I tend to say things.
Yeah.
And then the
Myself
podcast.
with Facebook, Instagram, I have it. It's there. It's there. But Facebook, TikTok. I've recently started with TikTok and I'm really loving it.
Oh,
And
what's your TikTok handle? I don't think
YouTube.
I'm following you there.
Yeah, it's at Sandy Chinogray.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely follow you back from there.
I really appreciate you putting these stories out for women to see, like you can break through.
Amen to that. Thank you so much. I thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your story with such honesty. You didn't like hold back. You really shared everything that you had to share, and it's really not easy. You shared it with honesty, with strength, and I really admire that. Thank you so much. And one thing I'll say is your journey really reminds me of what healing is all about. And to anyone else listening, they can actually testify that your story is just a reminder of how you are worthy. You are deserving. Everyone is worthy. We are all deserving and capable. I mean, listening to your story, I've seen all those three things: worthy, capable, deserving. And really, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate.
It sounds like you read my website and using those words. It's literally on there. You're worthy, deserving, and capable of living a life you never imagined was possible.
Wow. So, as I was listening to your story, you just reminded me of Isaiah 43, verse 19. I'm just going to read a bit of it before I round off, which says, I see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? So, what you were sharing, your whole story just like sums up to me Isaiah 43, verse 19, that you know what, no matter what you go through, listening to Terra's story, just a confirmation that no matter what you go through, the Most High is springing up a new thing, even though you might not have perceived it yet. So thank you for sharing your story and proof that the Most High, your story is proof that the Most High can bring in new beginnings. He can even bring in a new, a new something, a new light into your life, even after going through a deep loss and addiction. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you for sharing your story. And for those who've watched this conversation that I've had with Terra, and you've watched it right to the end, thank you so much for hanging around. And if her story has resonated with you, I'm going to share her handles again in the comment section. So be sure to check out the comment section and share this video with a friend who needs to hear this. like this video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any of the conversations that we will be having on this channel. So for now, we are checking out, and take care and stay blessed. Bye-bye.